All right. What do you got?
Okay, so been attempting to build the business rules for ambient attribution.
Okay, that's
Therefore,
cool.
yeah, it is pretty cool actually.
Is there
So
something
I thought
committed, or is it just on your local machine at the moment?
I just committed it
Just committed.
2 or 3 months ago. It's Dreamcatcher business rules.
Okay.
Now, so I decided to go the long way around rather than try to just write them from scratch. What I did, I've got a number of transcripts from what we've been talking about and the website and all the stuff we went through.
Right.
So I ingested that and then had quite an interesting HAL session, which probably meant that's what caused us to run out of credits. In order to generate the rules, and so I've now got the rules. I've started to edit them a bit, but I haven't got very far on that one. But what would be really good is if we go through the definitions, which you mentioned,
Okay.
and if we can get a set of business rules on Dreamcatcher, then that's some meat that we can work with.
Right.
So,
From my side, I fell into a trap today. I thought I could come up with a formula that expressed the efficiency of an innovation network based on parameters such as number of participants, whether they were full-time employee, contractor, or freelancers, and all those sorts of things. And I failed and recognized that that has been a classic time hole that gets me every time. So I need to just stop thinking we're nearly there. I swear it felt close today. Didn't happen.
well, I'm feeling pretty pumped about.
Okay, sorry. Anyway, yeah.
Definition of Dreamcatcher.
All right, cool. Did you push it? Can you push the commit you made?
Already have.
No.
It should be the latest one in Dreamcatching.
Dreamcatching has no commits on main.
Oh, shit. Help if I actually press the button.
Button pushing is good.
Yeah.
Here we go. Business rules 01. Okay, got it.
Right, it should be there now.
Yep. So the thing I'm looking at is
So specifically inside of Dreamcatching is where's it gone? There it is. Files. Right, if you look inside the
Dreamcatcher
card
business
game,
rules.
yeah, that's the one. Yep.
Okay.
So what suggests in the spirit of NL, if we are tight with our descriptions of what we're talking about, I think the transcript could easily update these, as opposed to typing real time.
Yeah. I had an idea on that. I think that if we can do a transformation before we do get our bots or our business bots to do things, where the transformation is to figure out which concepts of our definitions the user is talking about, and then retrieve those and put them into the prompt.
Yeah. I think that's what you texted, wasn't it? And
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea. Essentially, it is it's like a I don't know, like a symlink between definitions. It's like you say tomatoes, I say tomatoes, whatever.
It just transforms it and has more likelihood of being similar to a test case that we would have run, and so the chance of a predictable output is higher. Additionally, I think we should also add the step-by-step thinking to all of the bot outputs, where it's just reasoning is like this background set of steps, and then the main output is what we always show to the user. But I think that doing one-shot responses is just a bad idea. With step by step is.
The stuff. I've not gone back. I do have a half-built HAL4, but the Health 3 at the moment just gives you the whole output, which is, not great for latency and not great for your understanding.
And I also don't think it's
But
great for the bot's output either, because it's sort of it's not it's treating it like the primary response. It's not treating it like a scratch pad. Whereas if it was the parameters of a
yeah,
function call,
yeah,
like it knows that it's not
it
part
would
of the
be
response.
it would actually be a piece of piss. It would be like one or two maybe lines.
Yeah, right. Like you because
Do not
your
show me your
prompting,
internal thinking, but consider it.
yeah, your prompting has always been actually trying to get it to do step by step, but you've never been able to give it a clean output, a clean destination to pipe all that step by step thinking into, and it either pollutes the main prompt or it's done in its mind, whatever that is.
Yeah, well, the second one. So with a single bot, I've used this a couple of times. You say, right, here's the process. I don't care about, you know, consider it carefully, step by step. Take a deep breath, all that good stuff. Don't tell me about intermediary steps. Just give me the output. Or sometimes what I say is just when you have the output, say got it, and I'll ask questions.
Mm.
Um, which I think is a better way of doing it. I've used that a couple of times now. It works quite well. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So right, this is raw, mostly raw output from ingesting the website. This is how things we are doing, and also some transcripts.
It's not bad. It's probably better than anything we've put together in one single place before.
It's not bad for a start for 10, is it?
No.
So what would be good is to have our human spice.
All right, so we need to change that. That needs to be actors.
Yeah, so if we go through each one of these, well, we can go backwards and forwards, but if we stick to certain terms, then the transcript I can add into this and say rewrite this, considering what we stated.
Okay, so what would you like from me specifically during this session? How can I be of best assistance?
I'd like to. One thing is just to go through this. That's if I had that, then that's brilliant. That'll do for today, and then I can get back onto it. And what I'm going to do then is I'm going to stick it through CreatorBot and see if
this looks familiar.
For
this looks familiar. The highlighted stuff in blue.
Yeah, just like what I'm going to try next is put it through an ERD bot. And
why is ambient attribution missing from this list?
Oh, it didn't pick up. Oh no, it was part of that list, but I asked it to expand on where it thought ambient attribution was.
Oh, so it's sort of trying to make that.
That is part of that list, but it's not. So I don't know if you want to read through that and then start tearing it to pieces, or praising the overlords.
So how far, how does this relate to getting user stories for...
So the workflow I'm working on at the moment is with business rules. I think we can create an ERD that actually runs a shitty version of ambient attribution, but the important thing is then I can create a very large number of proposed user stories as opposed to do it from hand.
Okay.
Because and then it's a matter of editing. It's like, no, that doesn't make any sense. Oh, that's a good one. Oh, I'll expand on this one.
Right.
Exactly as we showed last time, where it's if you've got an ERD shaped bot, it seems to be pretty good at then saying, well, pairwise, if someone who is, building something is interacting with someone who's putting up escrow, how does that work? And you get a large number of variations, and the coverage is much better. as opposed to me going through and doing it from, with my meat brain, trying to figure out where it all is. But also what it does do is, if it does work, then we've got a bot that is ambient attribution. We can try it out and see what happens. Start with, business rules, and then
what is the first target for which to apply the ambient attribution?
Well, I would just put some test data through, unless you got a better idea.
What would be the test data?
I'd probably generate it. I would get it to generate a fictitious app and say create 20 guys who have.
Why can't you use some real data?
Do we have any? That is to hand. I mean, real data would be better, but do we have any?
We have nothing but real data. What about all of GitHub? Like, can we?
Okay. Yeah, sure. How do we get it digestible?
What format does it need to be in to be digested?
Well, I haven't taught it a format yet, so any format that GitHub produces, I can teach it, saying this is the format. So the format doesn't define the information.
Yeah. Well, why don't you what about if you figure that out, and then I'll help you get that implemented? Because otherwise, if you make it fictitiously, then we still got that same problem of like, well, what does the data look like, and how do we translate it?
Is there a good, because ideally what I'd want is quite a repo with quite a large number of users.
How many?
20.
20 users?
Well, it's not large, is it?
But that's what you want for your...
Yeah, just to keep it so that I can actually trace it with manually. If it gets any more than that, probably it's going to get untraceable. It doesn't have to be 20, but that sort of thing. It's a small project, right? It can be any project, but if there's some kind of download of who committed what, that would be a thing.
Is there any age restrictions?
Age? No.
Like how recent or how old?
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Are you considering issues?
Yes, issues would be good, because those are also contributions. How rich does the download or the information in Git get that is easily downloadable?
You can have it all, I think. This is probably a good one. These are some interesting ones. Contributors. We have 6, 10, 14.
Yeah. That looks about right. So, how do we get that out into some kind of text format?
What do you want it to be?
Anything that's text and self-consistent. Doesn't matter what it is. So, for example, could be a timeline that this Lukaku Sonoto guy committed this on this date. That sort of thing. A timeline would probably be the best start.
A timeline? Well...
Probably, yeah. So on this date, this person did this.
Right, but that's just the git commit log, isn't it?
Okay, so where's that then? Sorry, I'm not as sprung up on Git as you are.
Okay, so here's on this date.
is there a quick way, or is this an easy way of dumping out all the data behind that? For example, deployments, redeploy.
Yeah,
That would have a hash.
that's the hash.
Is there a quick way of just dumping all this out into text?
This thing right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me just play with that to make sure I can get it how you want it. Like that?
Hey, all right, let's see this. This looks right. So, commit, there's the author. Author is unique. Date, stamp, fix action address. And these are the comments. And resolves. Resolves hash 319 means
So that,
issue.
yeah, issue number 319.
Sorry, 319, yeah. So that's an issue that's been raised, and it resolves that issue.
Oh dear, what the hell? Oh, sorry. The message was in the commit message. The error was in the commit message, and that's why it fooled me. I was like,
oh yeah,
did
yeah,
I?
okay. Yeah. Cool.
So, yeah, sorry, what am I doing now?
No, this is great. So, how do I get this? Or actually, I just need a test file. So, if you could simply just save that and send it, I'll use this.
You want that file piped out?
Yeah. And obviously, we don't know what the impact of these different changes were. But it'll give us something to start with.
So this is the test file.
Okay. Yeah.
Is that fine?
I think so. I think that'd be perfect because it's well formatted, and
I might
I
just
don't know whether it's got all the types that could be exported, but
I'll just strip those special characters out for you. Don't know how to strip those special characters, whatever.
sorry.
Why do you
characters are consistent? Sorry.
Why do you want that though? Like that's
because I want to populate it with some kind of test data. So once we've got the ERD, I could generate test data, but it'd be easier to have.
What does test data look like?
Well, it looks like well, what we've got here is contributions, right?
Yeah. And how are you going to process that list of contributions?
I'm going to put each of these guys in. This, are now Orioles. Is now a user. He's contributed, that commit.
Oh, so
this time,
this person, yeah.
Yep. He's contributed this commit at this time, and that will give us the kind of the contribution side. It won't give us anything about people putting up for escrow, but
right. But it won't also won't give us any information about what was included in there.
Yes, and therefore we can't tell what the value is. So there's no impact, but I'll have to work on that because the impact could be quite tricky to figure out in terms of just getting an initial step. Oh, yeah, blame. That could be. That could be something.
If I was a gambling man, I'd say this was the main file. Let's So that's git blame is just that's the commit and the author that last changed that line.
Okay.
Now there's an interesting way to look at that. If you go, if you hit that and then you go blame,
Mm-hmm.
then it gives that to you in a slightly prettier form, but allows you to walk back in history as well. So that's
Okay.
all the people, which commit message, age, line.
Okay. How does blame differ from just history then?
Blame, the history shows the commits that were made in linear order, but
Mm-hmm.
blame shows the file lines with the commit that last changed them. Blame is another word for attribution, but it has a slightly pessimistic tone.
Right. Okay. So you got the file that was changed and how it was changed.
Yeah. The
Who changed it?
restriction on the format of looking at it like this is that you can only see the most recent change, but this button indicates that this line has had multiple changes.
Mm-hmm.
Most of these lines have, but in a typical file, you would see like this line looks like 49 to 53 have sat the same for 3 years,
Right.
right? And there's no, that little history icon is not present here because someone made that line and then forever did it sit. So at least they got something right, you could say.
Yeah. That's
Also, this colon
well.
remains.
That'd be an interesting start for 10 for value. Value is something that you put in and nobody's had to come in and change.
Um, is it though? Because it might be so mundane that there's no value
Yeah, but
to it at all.
I need some kind of bootstrapping thing up.
Okay.
Um, and
Well, I mean,
it's almost
this.
certainly not going to be right, but
Okay. Yeah, I'm in support of any old thing that'll give us
yeah.
something.
So
So,
how
so
do I
this is.
get?
Sorry, what are you asking for?
Yeah, so there's, I mean, this is a rich GUI where you can drill back and so on, but
Do you want
is
it
there
in
a
text
possibility
format?
of getting the, yeah, but the whole dump,
Yeah, I can get you that.
including the history, I
What?
have no idea what that's. So that,
So this is get
well, let's see what
blame.
comes, let's see what comes up with.
That's weird. So that was the output of that text dump.
Yeah, now you had to drill down, you said you could go to previous commits and so on. Is that
Right.
included in here?
No, this is just that front. This is
Right.
just the snapshot.
Is there a
How
way to
would
do
you
that?
want?
It's
How
not
would you
okay.
want that presented to you? Because you
In
got the
what?
logs here, and then you got the thing here, and you're
Yeah.
asking for those things combined.
It,
I still can't picture in my mind what is the format that would be perfect for you.
no, I'm not looking for a perfect format. I'm just going with anyone else's coherent format because I can teach a bot.
No one has a format that will give you line by line uh, all the history as well as
No.
what you know, like because it's you need an extra dimension in your view. You can't get
Oh
that
yeah,
out
yeah.
of.
But it could be a completely different dump. But what I'm looking for ideally is let's take one change, which is got three previous things that happened to it in its history.
Right,
It could
so
be a
something
completely
like
different
this one.
file. Yeah. So if you click on that, it goes somewhere, right?
Well, it just takes you back to the blame the that was a bad thing to click on because that was the very first thing. So all that's saying is that when I click on that, there was only one prior change. But if I click on this, there might be more than one. Yeah, so here we go. So this was a commit from 6 months ago that represents the commit that made the previous change to that line. And here are all the changes, all the blame for that file on that date. But I don't think that's giving you what you're looking for, though. That's what I'm worried about.
Well, ideally, I mean, there's quite a lot of data here in this GUI, right?
Yeah.
Now, ideally, what one is, I don't care what the format is because, ideally, you want all the information that generates this GUI and allows you to drill down and look at different things and so on for this repo.
Are you saying that in a working ambient attribution tool, there would be a widget that would be loaded that would act like a blame tool that would let you navigate the file system, the commit history, and the blame record, sort of like this, but even more nimbly, plus be chattable?
Yeah, but
Okay, and you would you be imagining?
Even if it wasn't a widget, if we're asking an ambient attribution bot to generate an impact crystal, all of this information is pertinent in some way. We've figured out weights and all that kind of thing, but all of it's pertinent. Drilling down and really.
So isn't it just simply generating a blame for each commit? Like, because you can generate this blame file for this file, and then just go walk backwards one commit at a time, and then just
could do that. But again, what I'm looking for is a text file that shows all blame and history behind the blame and just at once, and get some kind of unique attribution. That's if we were doing it, we would store it anyway. Right? But this is Git is our
we're at the moment we're only storing stuff in Git. So whatever we got here, this is all that we've got, and we need to find a way to transform that into something compact.
Yeah. So take this repo.
Yeah.
Ideally, what I want to see is who did what over time, and what they did. Who else worked on it previously? Now,
maybe that's the trap, dude. Like maybe this is how code is written now. But when we start doing NL coding, is it still the same? Like when all you're doing is working on adding a couple of lines.
Not line by line, no, but change by change, sure. So if you say that some dude here made a change, and that change turns out at the point of use to be quite useful, then that's something attribution needs to know. But if he was the first one to change it, creating a bot out of bare cloth, that's easy. Having a whole bunch
Is it easy? How would you do it? If it was just a blank page and you made a bot, how would you do it?
If it was a single bot, blank page, then anything attributed goes to whoever wrote that bot. That's the
really? That sounds unfair.
Well, there's nobody else involved. One person creates one bot, bot's used, all attribution goes back to that guy who created the bot.
What about the guys that spent $50 million making the LLM?
Okay. I'm putting that to one side. Okay, so that's just you could have 10 guys writing one bot each.
Right.
Nobody else involved. Usage goes in to the attribution, and then a percentage of that goes to the LLM. Sure, why not? But that is easily attributable. But what's less attributable is if we get 3 guys working on one bot over time.
Okay, isn't it then? Maybe this is a really bad idea to use real data. Maybe we should we could understand it better if we had some sterile, simple, contrived examples, like 3 guys working on a bot at a time, and then you can contrive different patterns of access, like fairly equal, one guy does it all, and then other combinations like this guy created a stuck that asked for this bot, and then this bot was made, how much is due the stuck maker?
Sure. The stuck maker and the kind of background tax are one thing. I'm
The back tax.
Yeah, exactly. The back tax. Yeah. What is more difficult is, say, if I wrote a bot and it wasn't working, you came in and changed one word, and the bot worked. Now that one word is actually quite valuable.
Yes, I believe, and this is I'm aiming to be constructive here. I believe that you repeatedly give the same scenarios. Why don't you capture those scenarios?
Sure.
So like that one guy comes in thing. Like I've heard that before. The 3 guys working on one bot. I've heard something similar to it. Like I don't think that you have that many scenarios, really, because actually,
many.
I just it's not your lack of scenarios. It's that the space is limited. It just so happens to be more than I have fingers on my hand, so it seems like unlimited. But I think it's countable, and I think it's below 20.
I think it's a lot below 10. I wouldn't be surprised.
Right.
If it's
so why don't we try
4 or 5?
Why don't we try and get those what's the word for those? They're like the Lego pieces, or the jig. They're like the pieces that you compose, that every kind of complex attribution scenario is just a combination of these basic things,
I would be
right?
surprised if it turns out actually that's like something that's closer to 3 or 4. So the obvious ones, create, update, and delete, are actions that could add value.
Why don't we start with
and detract value as well?
How about if we change the primary task to being defining all of the stories that exercise these foundational pieces, and then set how about deduplicating them and finding the holes, and then suggesting ones that are missing, plus you and I can sit there and shoot the breeze about which types, right? And then if we can get those, it's almost like the table of elements for attribution. If we can get that, then surely that's foundational progress, as opposed to, because looking at this thing here, I'm like, that data structure hurts my head. I don't think it can be analyzed up front. I think it needs to be analyzed by breaking down the activity commit by commit into the elements of attribution that it involved.
Okay, I agree. So again, what I'm trying to do here is give Hal a fighting chance by giving him some business rules and generating the ERT, which may be wrong, and then generating a whole bunch of things. We could dedupe those and see what falls out. I think what's going to fall out is really going to be, maybe about 4. maybe 5, something along those lines. I can, yeah, create readers usage.
Why don't you try to do
Update
that? Like,
delete.
isn't that the like it? Part of what we have to do is make a system that can withstand argument. And if you can transform all complex arguments down to one of these, say you say 5, I say 20 elements of attribution,
Okay,
then
well,
you can
well,
make.
let's do it. Let's do it
Okay.
now. So, right off the top of my head, I was saying create, update, delete seems to be remembering that attribution can be negative. Create, update, and delete is doing something. Read is usage of some sort. Okay, so you've got usage. Now, for each of these, where someone putting escrow is a placeholder, or of a parity with time. Right, money is same as time. So someone thinks I'm worth 500 quid a day, or 800 quid a day. Say, make it easy, and I'll do 1 hour of work, 100 quid, and escrow is 100 quid. Then that investor gets 1/8 of 1 day's work if I work for a day. So if the escrow, it takes 1 day and do 8 hours, I think I'm worth 800 quid a day.
This is the first time we've
Someone,
mentioned time in many, many,
yeah.
many,
But
many. Right?
the thing is, the thing is,
Time can't be the measure.
yeah, it's the almost the easy case is when people do stuff, which is why we want to get there, right? But
Well, I think that when
escrow
you,
is something else.
yeah,
Escrow is, so how would we deal with escrow if
so are we
qualities that
we're trying to
ambient
we're trying to
attribution is
figure
dealing
out
with?
how to attribute to someone who put funds in escrow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that the parameters of that function are how much they put in, normalized or rationalized to how much the total amount that was put in was. I think it matters when they put it in. Like if you were the first guy and you only put in $1, are you the same as the last guy when the total was 100 grand? You're definitely more important than the last guy who put in $100, I'd say.
Okay. All right. So escrow has got time component and
It's not it's
quantity.
not a time component, it's an order component, and it's about risk. Like
Or
when you put your
a
money
timestamp.
in,
A timestamp.
right, a sequence, because
Yeah.
if you put it in at the start of the sequence, you took the most risk. But if you put it
Yep.
in at the end of the sequence, then it's got the lowest.
Okay. Okay. So you put $1 in at the start.
Yeah.
That dollar is worth $100 if you waited 6 months or whatever, because there's lower risk. Which is, I think, I agree with that. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So there's some sort of a scaling. There's a scaling factor. Like I'm starting to see that these questions you're asking can be standardized.
Mm-hmm.
The list of questions is at least a page, but it's things like, investor puts in an amount early. How much are they worth compared to an investor putting something in late?
Sure. But for the
How
start pretend, we could just say take the start time and the time now and do a linear
well,
extrapolation
no.
as a
What I'm
starter.
trying to come up with is that for each story or each element that you can describe, you should be able to describe a mathematical equation that has some parameters. You don't have to pick what those parameters are, but you just need to make sure we've captured all the parameters. And I think that we can actually, I reckon we could get 99% of all the parameters and all the scenarios just between the two of us. And so that greatly simplifies the work, because if we've got a mathematical model that captures the majority of all the things, certainly all of the major contributing factors, then the task becomes how to weight those values.
I agree. But on the specific risk, uh, someone putting in something earlier is taking a bigger risk than some putting something
Right,
in
but then
later.
you also need to consider information. Like if someone put in um, $1 and then like the next day word came out or a commit was done that showed that what was thought to be totally infeasible is now feasible, then that dollar was way more ballsy than the dollar that came the next day.
No, no, I'm trying. I think on practical terms. Okay, so very, very simple would be uh, risk decreases over time. Therefore, earlier is worth more than later. Okay,
Right.
so
And
at the base level, let me finish this thought. On the base level, it could be just linear.
sure.
Now, how would you take into account events? You'd probably make it into a spline, which
No, yeah, I think that part of the recording aspect needs to be the risk profile of the packet. The risk, if the risk profile, sure, it can be recalculated as more information surfaces, but if we have a parameter that accounts for, you're given a function that represents the risk of the project over time, then whatever that is factored into the relative value between the investors.
So let's take a real simple case. I agree on the basis of what you're saying, but how would you evaluate risk at the start when someone's put $1 in?
You don't know how to do it. You only know how to evaluate risk at each moment in time. Looking backwards, you get a clearer view of what the risk was later than you did
Okay,
at
so
the time.
time tick plus one.
Yeah,
How what's the algo for calculating the risk of time t?
I think it's. I think we're going to have to take a lot of similar tasks and arrange them on a risk scale at different times, and then use that as the foundation for generating a curve calculation, a risk calculation bot, for example.
Okay, so here's my thought on it. Uh, just to get something going, we just do risk reduces with number of commits, say,
Okay.
and that is a shitty way of doing it. However, uh, because we're now talking about like graph of risk versus commits,
Right. All right. Look,
that doesn't need to be a straight
if
line.
we just wrap it up as like, start off a 10 as a straight line, but so long as it is known to be a function, and we can build
Yeah,
that out more later.
and then
Yeah.
we can do something more. We could maybe put a bell curve in there, or we could put a spline curve in there.
Yeah. You
That
could,
spline is
right.
pooled with
Right.
events.
It's some kind of function that we don't know yet, but someone needs to come and help us out with it.
Yeah, but the important thing is it is a function,
Yes. It
and
is
that
a
function
function.
is recalculated at time, x,
Yeah.
based on what we know now.
Yeah.
It's like okay, you took less risk than you want, or you took more
Yeah.
risk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Therefore, at
Yeah.
this point, you're worth this part.
Right. And so the widget that displays all this information to make it understandable needs to be able to display the risk curve of the item and sort of how the calculation was gotten. Now, what I'm hoping for is that we can build a model where we can twiddle with the dials, and it may turn out that the risk is actually not the biggest factor in determining the relative value. And, perhaps for like 1% of the effort, you can get within plus or minus 5% of the final goal versus trying to, balance the risk the whole way through. But
yeah. I think my view is actually risk is going to be less useful than impact crystals because impact crystals are
right.
always backward looking, whereas risk is forward looking. Or at least, imagine at this point, if you knew this and this point here, there's a dispersal event, how valuable was the thing you put in? That feels like, I don't know. Whereas impact crystals looks, right, okay, so this is what's valuable now. I mean, go back, perhaps to a simpler dispersal where it's like, well, you're right at the start. You contributed to this dimension. You didn't contribute to the other dimension. This other dimension, we've got this n-dimensional impact, which has an overall value, and we've got the weighting between the different bits of crystal. So you did something that helped that crystal.
Yeah.
Now we've quite collapsed it again to, well, who helped that one dimension? And it's like, well, we could just do it on straight number of commits and see what happens. But knowing that, we could easily spline it or do whatever we want with it, and we could get quite funky. With going from impact crystal back to dispersal as opposed to with risk at your step, because until it's actually used, you don't know what the impact is. I'll give you a solid example.
No, I got it.
You got it. Yep. Cool. Okay. I'm getting to the meat of this now. How the fuck to do it? All right, good.
So there's a way to box a large number of these things, which is the relative value of participants of the same class. So like calculating between contributors who was like ranking them and weighting them is separate to ranking to weighting contributors to investors.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So we can break the problem apart. That relative between kind is a different problem to relative between types.
Yes. Relative between kind is relatively tractable, although we haven't done it yet. But yeah, I can see.
Well, they both have differing levels of contention.
It's the we were talking previously about some kind of marketplace of value when we're talking about impact crystals in order to do that kind of.
I don't think that's a good way because it's not. It's already skewed. Like the market's already going to skew towards the capital holders because it's a market.
Not that kind of market. We were talking about some way of an exchange is probably a better word. Some way of converting one currency to another.
We were talking about converting different dimensions into other dimensions using an exchange rate. That seems different to saying, like, what is the value of a contribution versus the value of the investment is a question as old as time. And
yes,
the one between contributors, the debates will settle because you can have very, very plain, straightforward arguments where exceptions are called out and everyone goes, oh, yes, that's right. And then...
But you could boil it down on that particular one, and this is really, really valuable to talk through. You could, for example, say that the value of the investment is in its triggering value. $100 in escrow that sits in escrow and nobody pulls it up is worth nothing. If it triggers something to happen, then that thing necessarily only happened because you put money in escrow. If there's no money in escrow and it triggers itself naturally because something's turned up, then that's the base case. But if you stick $100 on the table and saying, I bet someone is not going to get up on that table and start dancing, and nobody starts dancing, the value of that $100 is, you put it back in your pocket. So there's something around the triggering value. And the triggering value then starts to sound a lot like an impact. The fact that you put down $100 on the table resulted in someone dancing. Okay, so what's the impact of someone dancing?
Couldn't you say the same about when you're the first contributor? Because that sort of...
Yeah, because
someone
the first person
invested some effort.
Yeah. Well, the effort that $100 is recognizing isn't the $100. It's the fact that you thought that I should put $100 down here, and I've got an idea that I want someone to dance.
Right, I'm not sure how to capture that. How does that affect the second $100 that goes down next?
Well, it's nested, isn't it? So if the dancer dances for 3 minutes for $100, and someone else
are you
like
just
that
trying
dance,
to solve this problem in a strip club? Is that what's happening here?
I just realized exactly what I'm doing. Yeah. It's like, she was pretty good. I was like, I'm going to put another $100.
I'm not sure we can model the ebbs and flows of venture capital using a strip club.
Oh man, I would bet 5 good Scots pounds that we could generate everything we need by thinking in terms of a strip club. I mean, what else is there? I mean, we've got investors, buyers, there's the band there, there's the guy that turns up and creates the strip club in the first place, and we've got the dancers. Why is it any different? It's the strip club.
No, because you were treating an investor like a buyer.
No, a buyer is not an investor. A buyer is someone who's buying something without risk because they know what they're getting.
Yeah, like that's what buying like a lap dance is. It's like it's sort of without risk. So you can't.
Well, no. The first guy. Okay, so let's hammer this strip club analogy.
Maybe we should move on. I don't think it's not solving the meat of the problem, which is.
I think it might contribute to it though. Give me 3 minutes and then absolutely. So
okay,
your question is what's the difference between a buyer and an investor? An investor is someone who puts $100 on the table and says, I just want someone to dance on this table. They don't know who it's going to be or how well they're dancing. The second guy who puts $100 on the table has already seen what the dance is like. It's like, I want another 3 minutes. The first guy is the investor because he's taking the risk of not knowing. The second guy is the buyer because he's
but
he knows what he's getting.
Yeah, that's obvious. Like we've defined it like that since day one.
Yeah. So, that was an answer to your question. You said, what's the difference between investors and buyers? Buyers are buying something and know.
I only meant in that situation. But an investor, like, what is the elemental problem we're trying to solve here? We're trying to solve what is the relative value between investors and between money, right? But it's not just money. It could be anything of value, right?
Yes. And
right,
also, but the investor's intelligence as well.
Yeah, but why is a contributor who's putting in sweat different to an investor putting in, like, what's the difference?
Well, this is and you pulled me up earlier on, it's something I've been talking about a lot. Contributors are investors, but you need
they're investing a specific class of asset, right?
Their time. But
Well,
then you pick up,
no,
we
no,
only
no,
deal with
no,
output.
false, false. I think that you've mentioned that line of thought multiple times tonight, and I think that that's false.
Yeah,
Time
but
is
I
not the
need to
thing.
put in something else other than time because
Yeah, you can have
we need
other
some kind of
something other
way
than
of.
time. That other
Yeah.
thing is innovation, because
Okay.
the investor's not putting in innovation. The investor's putting in um, asset or value, reward.
Yeah.
The
But we're
contributor is putting in innovation.
but what we're trying to do is to figure out an exchange rate. Now, the reason I go for time is because it's
Do not go for
quantifiable and
time.
money is.
Do
I
not
don't
go
know.
for
I don't know.
time. Time is the
It's not
worst thing.
right. It's just it's like a bootstrap, right?
It's not right. There's a better
We
bootstrap to be found. It's
okay.
time is not it.
All right. So we need some way to take a step back on the meta of it. We need some way of exchanging a contributor's contribution to an investor's cash. We need to make those the same somehow.
But only when it comes to attribution, right? Like the contributors get paid out what the investment was in full, right?
Mm, yep.
Yeah.
And they just transfer that. Yeah.
Yeah. And now what we're trying to figure out is what is the split between the group of contributors and the group of investors as soon as one buyer purchases the output
Uh,
of the contribution, right?
yes, but I'd remove the groups to keep it simple. One contributor, one investor, one buyer.
Don't think it changes anything by doing that, but yeah, sure.
But yeah, we'll just keep it simple for the thought experiment. Okay, so um, investor puts in $100. It triggers something
Yep.
in that a contributor does work,
So
and the buyer
there
goes,
was
"Oh, I
part of
have worked."
one of the parameters is the triggering event.
Yep.
Another parameter for are you saying that the triggering event contributes to the exchange rate between contribution and investing? Is that what you're saying?
Um, no, attribution, the triggering event is a factor. Um,
That's what I
so
just said, isn't it?
okay,
Because it could be
reword that then.
like investors. Sorry, I genuinely thought that's what I said. Like the
Okay, yeah,
we're trying to figure out what is the exchange rate between the investor and the contributor, and
yeah,
you're saying that one of the factors in that equation is the triggering effect that the investment has,
yes,
right?
and that is
That's
for for a
part
very
of the
simple.
balance of
Yeah,
how
exactly.
of why it's worth this and not that, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think we are talking about the same thing. So
Okay,
imagine there's nothing, and someone has an idea and they want to put, money behind getting that done. Put enough money in, it actually gets
right.
done.
So we could actually, using the idea of the single investor, single contributor, we could define the elements exhaustively by considering all possible combinations of timing, like investor first, then contributor, or contributor first, then investor, then more contribution. Like
Yes,
those.
because the contributor is, if the contributor is first, but yes, but let me talk through just for my own benefit. So the
Yeah,
contributor first is taking a risk by building something they don't know whether anyone has any interest in. And the investor goes, huh, I like that dance. I'll put in the second $100. I'll keep it going. It's like, okay,
right.
so and that seems equivalent to the investor. Nobody's done this ever before. Here's $100. So there's it's almost like a first mover advantage here, isn't there? Like first
Yeah,
to
but
come up with an idea
it's not just
and do something
first
about it.
mover. It's like the sequence of moving, because I think we can break it down
Uh-huh.
to be like because what if you've got two, you go contributor, investor, contributor and then another investor comes along, like we can break this down to say that the second investor came after the third contributor, and because we can actually break down the decreasing of the triggering effect, because the triggering effect is a form of the risk curve. And
Yeah.
so there is like not clock ticks but batches of events
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
contribution and investing, if they happened on either side of that boundary, they mean different things because one came before the other, but there may have been already prior things. And
Yes.
so what I'm really looking for is a form of calculus where you can say that by breaking it down into these infinitesimal singular events, we can have a formula that can sum the continuum of contribution and investment considering just what happens in these individual slices.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's almost certainly we're going to end up in calculus at some point. That's inevitable. Um, the question is inside the international matrix. What is the different units and how do they relate? And that I think is the main issue. So, say if we've got one event, and it could be contributor first. Well, actually, two events. It's the start, contributor first, then investment, or investment first, then contributor. How do we mash those two together? How do we square them? That seems fair.
Square the round.
Yeah.
I think we need to pick a value that is based on some averaging of a large number of similar events. Like we can't, right?
Yep. Yep. So that means that averaging would result in some kind of weighting.
Yes.
So say if we
And
didn't have
the weighting
so
can be just so long as it is parametric of some kind. I don't think it's our job to solve the weighting other than having a guess. I think our first pass job is to solve what are the dials, because
yeah,
right,
exactly.
what
Because
are the dials
we don't have
seems
a
fixed.
way. Yeah, we don't have a large amount of data to say weighting at this point should be that.
Right.
But to bootstrap, we just need to state that weighting.
Yes, that's fine. Yep.
And then we'll refine it as there's more data of similar events. So okay. So the weighting is on the event. The impact crystal, I guess we're talking about, is transformed from before to after, because the event is a thing that changes the impact, and that event can be anything. But the weightings are how it's transformed from one to the next. Okay, that makes sense because you have a weighting per dimension. Now, when it comes
Yeah,
to
this is what I was looking for. This is Stripe detailing how different kinds of payments work, and different ones require different regulation. We should be able to draw a similar set of diagrams that represent how different parameters that go into the function to calculate attribution, how they go, because these events aren't arguable. They are exhaustively definable. Like the sequence, contributor, investor, or was it investor, contributor? Like all those things are representable in these simple diagrams, and then we need to shift the problem of what is the weight to a totally different independent
Yeah. Yep.
problem. Like that's a separate
Agree.
stage in our,
Yeah. No, I agree with that.
because you
So
can't
I think we
argue
can.
with these things. You can't argue with these fundamental.
Yeah. So I think we can do that so long as the uh, it seems reasonable to do that with each dimension. So, for example, one of these diagrams would work with uh, uh, investors over timestamps, um, and independently contributions over timestamps. The trick is when it comes to a dispersal event, is who gets what. That's the real crux of it. How do we can do the relative value of investment, the relative value of contributions, I believe, and any other number of dimensions as long as we're measuring like for like. When we're measuring unlike from unlike, then I think probably for now we just assume that is some kind of weighting in that we just say at this point, knowing everything about the project, the investment usually in this sort of project is worth 25%. Contributions are usually worth, you know, whatever, 60%. 15% goes to people who have contributed issues. And then it's the uh, exchange rate between these that's the real tricky bit.
Hmm.
But again, using your analogy, saying, well, okay, how about we get people in retrospect to say whether they felt a distribution was fair or not, or we look at how it's actually used and bring in other information, and we get a bot to figure out what these exchange percentages are with a known set of dimensions.
It has to be the iterative improvement loop has to be that there's some data that we've gathered and AI has done some ruling on it where it was given a set of rules and comparisons and it worked out a bunch of stuff and said this is the weight, and then a person complains about it, and then a solution by changing the weighting and the bot is come about, rather than it being something that's tied to the vote of people. Like the vote of people sounds like not how we want to
Oh
have
no,
this.
no. I'm assuming that the exchange uh, percentages are a bot, and that bot can pull in any information that is given.
It should be restricted though, because it should be a very tightly guarded set of information. I don't know how to deal with the fact that people are going to complain about that, but I think that if we can make it so that when you look at how it was made, it's like, well, that's pretty fair enough. Like it's either you use it or you don't, as opposed to have your
Yeah,
say, cast
yeah,
a
yeah.
vote.
But what I was saying is though that the bot can bring in information about real world impact over time as well. So
Oh yeah, because
given
impact matters to.
yeah.
Well, here's a simple question then: does impact change the exchange rate between contributing and investment in any way?
Every time,
Every
every time.
time, so every time we need to calculate a new exchange rate.
Yeah.
And does impact then also change the relative weighting of um, investors relative to other investors and contributors relative to other contributors?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
every time. Yeah,
And
every event requires that regeneration of
right,
the percentages.
right.
Yeah,
Okay, so it's never ever, even if no more contributions were received, it's never ever set.
Yeah.
It's always
Yep.
dynamic based on expanding awareness or information. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So, what is the attribution due to the first buyer?
The first buyer is exactly the same as the first contributor and the first investor
They have
on
a
another
triggering event.
dimension, and that collapses into the situation we were just talking about how what the exchange rate is,
Right. So
and maybe the
ultimately, once we reach steady state, there's going to be an exchange rate between, for any given buyer, there's an exchange rate between the investors, the contributors, and the previous buyers that
yeah.
determine how the dispersal goes, right?
It seems that it would be reasonable. The first step of generating the impact crystal is rectify the relative weights of anyone who's had anything to do with one of these dimensions,
Wait,
like
what?
investment.
How did an impact crystal have anything to do? How did generating the impact crystal have anything to do with the attribution?
The impact crystal is an n-dimensional way of thinking about attribution, right?
No, it's a way of thinking about impact, and then attribution is taking each dimension in turn and mapping that back to contribution
Okay,
using the
let me step
attribution
through
formula.
let me step through what I was about to say. So
Okay.
take all investment, and you want to rectify the relative based on the event. Okay, so the information we have now and all the information we've got previous,
Yeah.
what are the percentages due to each investor? Then
Okay.
you go to what the percentage is due to each contributor. It's the same thought process, but a different dimension. And then what's the percentage due to each buyer?
Mm-hmm.
Different dimension. Now, say you could add in other dimensions, usage.
So for each dimension, you go through and you calculate the ratio between buyer, investor, and contributor.
Right.
And then once you've figured that out between those classes, you then go into each class and figure out the relative split between members of the same class.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Now we
And you
could.
do that for each dimension because it's going to be different for each dimension, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Because
Okay.
it's like for like, so it's relatively tractable. And then the tricky bit that we need, all the other scenarios that have used this sort of thing, they can get a hold of it, and then you can see, okay, so here's how we rectify between these. So we've got now 3 dimensions. It's a short step from there to take in other information. So the having provided a boat to let someone go over a river, saved their life, big impact. Okay, that same boat wasn't available to, tow a barge over and save 10 people's lives. So it's like, okay, but that's now again exactly the same thing. Is now we've got a new dimension, rectify inside of that dimension, and then figure out what the exchange is between the other dimensions. Feels like the same thing, that process. Same dimension, and then working out the exchange rate. And
All
now
right.
you've
So
got something.
for every dimension, you figure out the impact. Then for each dimension, you split the ratio between classes, and then in each class, you split between members of that class.
Yeah.
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 Now, where is the ratio to the usage of previous technology that was used? Because that's not an investment, a contribution, or a purchase. That's
That's another
reuse.
dimension.
Or it's not a dimension. Are you saying that an investor is a dimension?
Yeah, their investment is a dimension. Yeah,
Their investment is a dimension of what?
of investing in the thing that they invested in. So
What?
they put $100 on the table. Someone else did. We need to rectify those two. Their investment is a dimension, exactly what you just said. So you need to work out the relative weights of those two investments, and then you do the thing we just talked about.
But where is the reuse of technology? Where is using something that came? Where's prior art?
Okay, so prior art feels like, I'm not really thought about this one. This is worth talking about. It feels like that should be another dimension, in that it can't be reconciled with stuff that has been done, as in created, because it's already created. So we can't immediately lump it into any other dimension. It's not an investment, it's not contribution, and it's not buying. It feels like it's just another dimension, but it follows the same pattern. So what we'd need then to think about is prior art. How do we rectify the use of prior art?
Okay, so once more from the top, when you're attributing, you start by finding the relative ratio of prior art, buyers, investors, and contributors,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And then within those individual groups, you split up between the contributors based on whatever dimension you're assessing at the time and the contributions that were made. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
And interestingly enough,
Now, final question.
One. I've got lots more, but you go for it.
Where is the attribution that is consumed from the cost of running that calculation?
That is one of the easier cases. Because if you count the cost of running the contribution, by contribution, are you talking about tokens burned by trying to build this thing?
Nope.
Say, for example.
Nope. I'm saying that when a purchase occurs and there's a dispersal event, the cost of calculating the dispersal event will consume some of the attribution value. Where is that accounted for in this equation?
Same thing. It's just another dimension, isn't it? It's just a dimension that's particularly easy to calculate, because the cost of doing that event and the cost of doing the last event is probably pretty much the same. You could take inflation into it, but that seems very simple. It's just another dimension. The trickier thing, no, it's not a tricky thing.
So now there's 5.
How do you smudge it?
Now there's 5 relative calculations to be made.
Yeah. There could be
prior art
as well.
Contribute. Yep. There could be more. Tell me.
Yeah.
You sure?
Project management.
That's contribution.
Contribution. If we're talking about, say, stuff done.
Yeah.
Project management isn't necessarily stuff done. It helps people to do stuff.
That's stuff done.
Is it? So if there's a particular talented coder, and,
contribution is the expenditure of effort. Investment is the promise or the escrow of reward.
No, contribution isn't the expenditure of effort. It's the an output. It's the production of stuff. So this is why
fair enough.
Back when I was talking about time. So if it was just effort,
time is not output.
Exactly, but effort is not output. Output is output.
True.
Someone could take 4 times.
I would say that project management is you would be producing project management artifacts like a project plan, chase up
Could be.
emails. Like those are things being done.
Yeah, yeah. But how about the person who um, sees an opportunity and gets onto the system, and knows you're good at this, you're good at that, you're good at that, you're good at this. Let's all
Okay,
get
so
together.
inside of
Here's an
each
idea.
class, inside of each class, there are also many different subclasses which have a similar problem as to what's the value of money um,
Yeah,
versus
yeah.
labor, and then there's like what's the value of the same kind of labor to each other is one type of problem, but what's the value of different kinds of labor to each other? Like,
Well,
what's the
exactly.
value of project
And
management to
uh,
coding,
I,
right?
yeah, and I think we can do a reasonable stab at the first few dimensions, but I don't think we need to limit them. For example, say if in the crowdfunding sense, um, you get a whole bunch of people doing thumbs up, saying, "Keep going, guys, keep going, keep going. We want this, we want this, we want this." Now that's another dimension that has contributed to this thing being produced, but it's another dimension again. You could have news articles being written about it.
Okay, so
I want to.
this is the starting. This is the classification system. I think we should start with.
All contributors. Maintenance, mentoring. Mentoring is a good example of what I was talking
Yeah,
about.
project
That doesn't produce
management,
an output. Yeah.
promotion, question. So if we just feed these in as like these are the labor classes that we're going to record for now.
Yeah. Yeah. And in the system, we're step one is reducing each so it's calibrated like for like, and then we will cross them to calibrate what the relative weights are of mentoring to code production to investment, for example.
Yep.
But
Okay.
also, this is isn't this? I was saying this is very close to um, the impact crystal. All you need for the impact crystal is a snapshot of all the information you've got now of how it was used.
Yep.
But you've got these multi dimensions, so you take each one dimension, and that's what we're talking about here.
Mm.
So, investment, that's one dimension, contribution, mentoring, project management, all that sort of thing. And also, if you want to see, if you're wanting to filter, say, I don't really care about mentoring, I think that's a bit, wussy. And then you get a new impact crystal and going, okay, so, if you were to do, put some value in that, if it's like brownie points, it doesn't have to be cash. Put brownie points into this, given your filter, this is who is owed what. I think. It all seems to be, I'm not belittling how difficult it will be to do each stage, but it seems to come down to normalize each dimension individually and then normalize all dimensions together. How we want to do that, to start with, we could just say all dimensions that we can think of are equal, and then we'll get evidence about some are more equal than not. We can draw that
No, I don't
evidence
think
from
you. I don't think you want to say anything about um, making them equal.
No, I'm talking about the zero starter.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah. So we need. It would seem reasonable
We
if
should
we
just
are.
leave them undefined for now. Like we don't need to define that exchange rate between dimensions for us to get going. I think it's perfectly fine to leave them un uncompared. We don't, right? They
Uncompared is
don't
the
need
same
to be
as leaving
reduced.
them equal. Yeah. Uncompared is the same as leaving them equal. Right.
No, it's not because you're able to take each one and then do the attribution calculation on them you don't need to compare the dimensions of the impact to proceed with the attribution at all.
Um, yeah, but I'm thinking practically about what I put into the bot.
Practically,
And
the least amount of work is to do no comparison.
no comparison is me just stating it, which is what we just said. It's like I'm not asking the bot to do anything. I'm just saying 10% or 20% to each of these things. So the bot's
hang on.
doing nothing.
You're talking about the impact crystal and the dimensions of impact that we've worked out, right? Yeah. And you want to collapse that down to one dimension. Is
yes,
that right?
So
Why?
that you get whatever you put in as your value measure. You know who.
Why don't you just leave them uncollapsed? Like, why do you need to collapse the impact crystal down to one dimension, even for the starter for 10 one?
Well, okay, so for the starter for 10, you've got an investor which is being collapsed, you've got contributors collapsed, and someone says, I'll buy that for $100. Who gets what?
What do you mean collapse? Why did you collapse investors?
Okay, so you got the investor dimension.
You were talking about impact. Now you're talking about the contributors' dimensions?
No, you got the investor dimension.
Yeah, which is a contribution, which is a, what's the name for the group of dimensions that gets paid out to?
The group of dimensions that
so investors, contributors.
I don't think we've come up with a name with that one. Let's come up with a name.
Well, those are the recipients. Yeah, the recipient dimensions.
Yeah. So
right. Why do you need to collapse them?
Okay, let's take a simple case. Someone puts investment of $100 in. Contributor does it.
Yeah.
We have something. Buyer buys it.
Yeah.
The buyer gives $100 for having bought it.
Yeah.
How do we split those between investors and contributors without collapsing?
You don't need to collapse anything. The one.
So who gets what? Of that $100, you got a contributor.
Yeah, you were talking. Let's say there's a second dimension on the impact, right? There's one impact is monetary gain, and the other one, just for argument's sake, is carbon dioxide output reduction. Just to pick one.
Yeah. So we got two values going in.
Two impact dimensions.
Yeah.
And the attribution is due to the
contributors and investors.
Yeah.
So who gets what? 100 units of value going in.
So you get that. You take the $100. You don't need to collapse it. You don't need to compare it in any way to the CO2 dimension. Right?
So who gets what in this? You got contributors or a contributor and an investor, and you got 100 units of value.
Well, you got $100, and you got let's call it 50 carbon credits. I don't know, that's probably wildly off, but let's just for the sake of numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you take the component of the impact that was the carbon reducing piece. Let's, for argument's sake, say that that was mostly due to what the contributor did, and not so much for the investor.
Mm-hmm.
And so the carbon impact.
That's exactly the piece. It's like mostly due to the contributor, but somewhat due to the investor. What I'm talking
that's
about
what you meant by collapsing, is when you make the okay. So when you set the exchange rate between the recipients, that's what you want to call that collapsing. Okay, and so
meaning.
Okay, all right. So that means that you still don't need to do any collapsing on the impact side. You only need to do collapsing on the recipient side, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was the discrepancy I had. So that's fine.
Got you. All right, that's not right. Yeah, cool. Probably a bad use of words, but collapsing is probably not the right word. But anyway. But yes, that's the.
I think you're right. I think it is collapsing because you're setting a You're collapsing them down to one dimension, whereby they're related by a ratio.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
and then
And it's that
even
mostly or not so much thing that you just
yeah,
mentioned. It's like, well,
and even
what's
like
what's the mostly?
even all these types of contribution represent a collection of dimensions within the contributor cone. And
Yeah.
when it comes to payment time, you are trying to collapse them all down to one line, the contributor line, where you've got relative ratios between all of the different
Yep.
dimensions of
That's
contribution.
easy. Yep.
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 And then you've got all the investment, which some may have been money, some may have been political favors, some may have been who knows what, but all
Yep.
of that gets collapsed down. Then those two single dimensions get collapsed into one, which gives you the exchange rate between money and capital and labor.
Yep.
And then that then gets attributed to based on the impact dimension.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But the
And
impact
impact can be
dimension,
any value,
yeah,
but you've got ratios now, so you now
yeah.
know. Yeah.
So
Fair figures.
collapsing of impact dimensions is um, something useful, but I think we should defer that for as long.
Mm-hmm.
Like we can be up and running without collapsing that because it doesn't. The collapse only needs to happen on the recipient side, and like exchanging carbon credits for dollars, there is a value for that. So, but it's not for us to say what that should be. Like that should be the problem of
Oh,
the.
no, we don't need to collapse dollars for carbon credits.
That's right. That
We
we
need
just
to just
simply
say you
we
guys
disperse it.
percentage dollars,
Yeah,
percentage
we
carbon
disperse
credits.
it, and then it's up to the holders of the
To whatever they
dispersed
want to do.
assets
Yeah,
to figure out what the pricing is and what they want to do. Like that's not.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and so
But like
this is good to define what the ambient attribution function is, because I don't think that we can really be argued with. Like it's sure people will suggest tweaks in that, but the foundation of it is not gonna. The concept, as soon as you agree to the concept, there's only so many
yeah,
ways to do it.
yeah. I mean, you could summarize the concept pretty easily. It's like you compared like for like with what you've added to, what you think you're due, and then we use bots to compare unlike things together to get a ratio, and then some value comes in, and you just get dispersed, and what you do with it is up to you in
Yep.
your wallet. It could be any number of currencies or tokens or
Hmm.
carbon credits or jube tubes, brownie
Okay.
points, medals,
Now,
whatever you want.
is that to say that the operation of the system that runs this calculation, is that going to be part of the prior art dimension, or is that its own dimension, which is like gas cost or computational expense?
Um,
Because it's going to cost money to run this calculation.
well, it's interesting, isn't it?
And then, do
There's
we
there
really want to
always
get paid in
two.
carbon credits, or
There's,
you know what I mean?
well, actually, yeah, I think we probably do want to be paid in carbon credits. Or,
Hang on,
right,
buddy.
say if
Just let me
nobody.
just
Okay,
make you
right, right.
aware of the problems of what you just said.
I know, I
Okay?
know. Let me run with
No,
this, right? Say if this was only used for non-monetary humanitarian purposes.
yep,
There is no money to disperse, but there should be some kind of value given to the fact that there's
so
money to
who
keep
paid
this
for the
going up
machine
and
to
so on.
run?
Well, now obviously this is not an ongoing business because it would fall flat on its face. But you were asking whether there is some kind of tax that's different from prior art.
Now, one of the ways you could approach that is to say that the running of the machine is external to the output of the machine, which means that whoever has interest in seeing a dispersal happen, they need to put the coins into the machine that needs to be US dollars that runs the machine to figure out how to disperse all these non-US dollar assets. Does that sound
Yeah,
reasonable?
it does sound reasonable.
Right,
Might be
okay.
missing a trick in that the very first thing built on Dreamcatcher changed the world inevitably, and we end up being multiplanetary. Huge amount of value, and all we've got is the gas prices.
Dude, that'd be a lot of gas. I'll take that. But but you know, that's the execution of the machine.
I think that is.
Prior art,
I think that's a different thing.
pri-
Prior art
yeah, prior
is.
art.
Yeah.
So whoever built the Dreamcatcher should always get a slot on the prior art dimension, however small, because you had to use it to even calculate the dispersal event. The
Yeah.
cost of running the dispersal event is independent from the prior art that you needed to assemble.
I think that's reasonable, and I think that's reasonable
Right? It's
because
not. It's not. Yeah.
the platform is the commons, right? In John Smith's terminology, and it's like everyone likes streetlights. How are you going to pay for streetlights? You can't really do it by the value of someone passing under a streetlight. You just need to tax people and say we'll provide streetlights. So it's the commons. So I think that is a different thing. Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
I disagree with your example, but I agree with the end
All right.
result.
All right. I like my John Smith
I don't like my text.
examples. I like John Smith, good Scotsman. Okay, all right.
So this sounds
That
like
feels diagrammable.
that was still hard to swallow. But I think if we start with little examples and build up, then we'll
Yeah,
get somewhere.
well, I reckon I can make a mermaid chart based on what we just said.
Okay, what we really need to get to is when the bot is able to update the mermaid charts based on our discussions of what seem like complex situations to us, but ought to be very simple to the AI.
Well, this is why I'm going through these business rules, because that gives a starter to get to the ERD level. I don't think Dreamcatcher is different from anything else processing. So we get that. We can generate a whole bunch of scenarios and test those, create those into tests, and then we do that virtuous loop thing. And then also when we got a new scenario which is hand cranked as opposed to bot generated, then we put it in and see if it breaks. Exactly the same as we were going through the other day with the awesome diagram.
This is pretty damn good, man.
It's not bad, is it? What I'd like to do, because what time is it? How much more time you got?
I'm out of time.
Right. Okay. It's the definitions that I think we need to agree on and make sure that we're happy with. Because
Which definitions?
At the top. Right at the top.
These ones? Okay, so that needs to change to actors.
Yeah. Is there anything? I mean, these are.
You need
generated.
to add definitions of the breakdown of different contribution types. Like you need to name what is it? You need to name
Oh, you need
right?
Okay, we need a name for what is the meta type of investment and contributions that are considered.
Yeah, and you got to give some examples with such a nuanced type of a statement. So, contributions is the umbrella term, and investment.
Yeah.
Investment needs to sort of acknowledge the multi-dimensional nature of investment as well.
I'd probably propose something like we move what currently let me give a starter for 10 on these definitions based on
Oh,
today's.
this is not your starter for 10?
Well, this is start for 20 or was it start for 10 plus
Starter
10? Whatever it is.
for a little bit. Yeah,
V2.
so
V2.
users that provide capital or effort, they don't provide effort. Effort is a contribution. And so an investor that provides effort would be an investor and a contributor.
Yes. And so I need
Capital
to
is
define
equated to
effort.
effort, is
Yep.
actually the whole essence of the machine we're trying to make.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah.
let's not just
Yeah.
tuck that away in
That
some
was
side
something.
point.
That was how it came up.
Oh, now it's house fault.
Yeah, it wasn't me. It was a bot. Talk to the bot. Yeah.
Services, well, helps an antiquated term now. Services doesn't. I think services is like a part of. Services falls under contribution. You need prior art or to name prior art
So,
because
but where would
service
mentoring go? Mentoring would be in
mentoring is a
services.
contribution.
Ah, right. Okay. So what I think I would do is I would say contributions are the collective noun for all these dimensions,
Yeah,
regardless of what the dimensions are, and then we define each dimension,
right.
of which services, mentoring would be the one. Say commits would be, you know, dev,
Well, no, it's because it's
investment,
not. It's
something
not
like
the.
that.
It's not the commit that was the code. It's not the commit that was the value. The commit could be shared by multiple different labor types. Like a commit is not a type of labor.
Mm.
Commits are used to express or to capture or to demarcate types of labor.
Okay, so
I
for
think it's
example,
safe to say that you cannot. The only type of contributions need to be captured in a commit somehow, right? Like it needs to
commit
be on
seems,
record
yeah, a
because
commit is
even
an
if you,
event, really, isn't it?
it's not. No, it's not an event. It's sorry, it's an event
It's changed state.
that
Sorry,
changes
hang on.
information, and so you can have a commit that was entered on behalf. Like say you talk to a guy and then someone else talked to a guy and then something good happened. It still
Mhm.
needs to be recorded somewhere and put into a commit for it to be considered for attribution. So if we can put a blanket rule around that says that the equation only works for what's on chain, you can't. If it's not recorded, then it can't be
Right,
attributed to.
but how do you say that then? It's a state change, right? In essence,
The state must have changed in some way.
right, right.
Yeah,
And state change means we can rerun all these things and figure out if there's value come in at this point. We
right,
could run models on it. If we did this state change, what would be the impact?
right.
Okay, so state change, and then I don't think we should limit the number of dimensions, for example. And we also think
There
we
isn't.
should,
There you can't limit the number of dimensions, but we
right?
can do our starter for 10, which is just pulling in this list. And then for our simple examples, we can just, you know, pick
Yeah.
our
Can you
favorite three
after the recording?
dimensions.
Can you ping me that URL because that's quite a good one to start with.
Sure.
Okay, so we've got we've got state change. State change has contributions that made it happen. Contributions are multidimensional and possibly even nested. So someone who's worked on something, other person's improved it, but got it quite wrong. Another person has got it. Someone put an issue in. Where do issues come in and so on? That's just another dimension. So we got a number of dimensions, end dimensions that all go into a state change. Because without a state change, nothing's actually moved.
Nothing changed, yeah.
Right. Okay. Right.
And
I'll draw
a
up.
commit,
I'll
a
draw this
commit
up.
is the unit of state change.
Yeah. Yeah. I probably not use the word. I like state change actually because commit is over indexed because of the whole git thing.
It is the get thing. That's exactly what it is in our system. It's not
Yeah,
anything but.
yeah, it could be state change is, well, we could use it. I just don't like using a word that's already well understood for a different reason.
Okay, sure. Investors, we need to mention how it seems to be any kind of capital where capital can be multi-dimensional, like
Yep, yep. It can be.
Buyers are still, buyers are not,
There are other side of
yeah,
the
but
thing, aren't they?
it's not buying anymore now that we deal in impact. It's consumers.
Yeah, yeah,
Because one of the formulas I was trying to figure out today, and I regret getting sucked into this hole, but it's, um, is that when you set the price of something, you cut off a huge amount of potential because you don't know that who you priced out of the market might have recommended your product on to a very wealthy person who used it a lot and paid for it a lot. And
yeah,
so that setting the price to be a fixed fee is like the most sort of brutal thing you could do, I think, to the success
yeah,
of your
yeah,
product.
yeah. And pricing is a huge topic
Yeah.
amongst
So
producers.
you're not a buyer, you're a consumer because your consumption generates an impact crystal, which is a measurement of the impact that you benefited from,
Yeah,
which is then used to calculate what you should pay, but it's
yeah,
used to calculate what is definitely going to be dispersed because dispersals are all ratios. And so
right.
even if you paid, one carbon credit and $5, you would still, those dimensions would be attributed, even if the impact crystal said you should have paid $1,000 and 50 carbon credits.
Well, exactly. And you get that when you install Linux, and it says, you got the sliders. Everyone, puts it. Well, I put it down to 0
Oh,
at a
you
time
stinge.
because I know I'm stingy. I think I give them money once, but not every time I
Said everyone
install
in
it. It's like
Scotland.
every time I download a new thing. But what you paid, the price that you're asked,
Yeah,
is different from what you should have paid.
correct. And
Yeah,
a good a good a good valuable system would be able to show you that you gained a hell of a lot more value than what the price was calculated that you should pay, because the price calculation takes into effect the value you gained plus like what can you afford, and you know
right. And keeping those separate would get past that problem with, hey, if I buy this and I get great stuff from it, are you going to come after me with another invoice
yeah, that's right, that's
contract?
right, that's
And it's
right,
like,
that's
no,
right.
we're not. We're just going to note what you
Yeah,
got out of it.
yeah.
Yeah,
And that'll come important later when you
yeah,
do something that needs attributing for, and we're gonna remember that you
that's
didn't
right.
pay.
Yeah,
And so, right? Because that's the other part.
karma,
Is
man, karma.
do we need to calculate karma in here?
I think
Because
karma is a good top level one under which a lot of things could go.
right, because you're like, well, before we give you this dispersal, we're just gonna look up your history, right?
Yeah,
And we're like, if you are a user that has taken a hell of a lot out of the system and never given anything back, should
yeah,
we disperse the full amount to you? I don't think so.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's definitely a dimension, and oh, yeah. Actually,
Right?
it is simply a dimension, which can actually alter your individual chunk of
Right,
what you
because
get.
some of your chunk should have been treated as an
Yeah,
investment
yeah,
that is now due to be as like a late breaking escrow,
yeah. I've paid
where
$10 and I've generated $1 million,
yeah, and then
and then
finally
someone else uses my $1 million idea.
yeah,
It's like, uh, I think the guys,
yeah,
you paid $10, you should get more.
you're gonna get lifted from on the way through. Like
Yeah.
You owe something.
Yeah. 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 Okay. I like that.
So,
Okay.
okay. Platform administrators. I don't know who these guys are.
That's us.
Well,
That's just us. You can't change the Dreamcatcher platform as any other user, but the Dreamcatcher platform may need to be changed, and so we need to state that
yeah.
as an entity.
I guess we need to lay out a plan to be not in charge.
Well,
Eventually.
Well, we'll hand over to some bot swarm when we get to
Yeah.
it.
When we even get in charge, we'll
The AI
hand it over.
auditors was an interesting one. I think it pulled this from the judges that we had.
Yeah, true.
People, and their chat about AI.
It's really the AI attributors.
Yeah.
Artifact, fine.
So
Yeah, it looks good to me, man. Like looks like
it's not too shady, is it?
No, it's pretty damn good.
So what I'll do for tomorrow then is I'll work primarily on the definitions. Maybe see if we can get an ERD chart up or something similar, and we take from there in order to generate a large number of synthetic scenarios, which I can look through and edit and say, no, that's not going to happen, whatever. And then we can, in future, add in new scenarios as we think, actually, that's not working. But the whole point of this is to get to the point where we've got a whole bunch of tests. And the easiest way to get tests is to say what you're testing. The easiest way to say what you're testing is to get a whole bunch of rules. So that is my plan.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to keep going with that testing framework. I'm sorry for the delays in it.
Yeah, no worries. Well, as soon as you get the testing framework, hopefully I'll have some tests for it.
Yeah.
Kind of cool.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Cool.
So, all right.
So
See you
I'll stop
tomorrow.
us there.
And